we develop healthy relationships and help our kids develop healthy relationships amid this world's sexpectations? That's the topic we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Today, I have a brand new guest to share with you. Her name is Barb Winters. She's the mom of a recovered pornography addict. She's also a certified sexual risk avoidance specialist. She is founder of Hopeful Mom, supporting parents in an online world where she offers encouragement and practical advice to parents and leaders. She's a lead facilitator at E3 Family Solutions, and she equips students to make healthy choices, and she empowers parents to aid their children. So welcome, Barb. I am so glad that you're here to talk about this very important topic on Flourish-Meant today.
Thanks, Tina. I'm so blessed to be here today.
In this second portion of our conversation with Barb Winters, I would like to get into some specifics about how couples and families can develop some parameters to make their relationships healthy and move down a healthy direction instead of conforming to the world's pressures to these sexpectations, as you called it, and end up in unhealthy patterns that actually do more to divide us than they do to bring us together.
Well, we can first start by talking about what the habits of healthy relationships are. So the bulk of the book talks about these 4 different habits, and the first is Christ-like love. And so we talk about that in Christian circles. So the foundation of a relationship should be Christ-like love. But what does that look like? You know, it's easier to say it than it is to promote it or enact on it. So I look at 1 Corinthians 13 in the book. I talk a little bit about 1 John, where, you know, the foundation is that God loved us first. And so we have to lean into that and allow him to love us and accept that love before we can love others, right? Because if we don't feel loved ourselves, then we're not going to be able to love others well. And then, you know, when we have that foundation, then we can do the selflessness and mutuality, and then communicate well with others because of that foundation.
So that sounds like a great roadmap toward helping develop those basics for what a healthy relationship looks like. Can you talk about how we learn to stand against the lies of the enemy that are in the airwaves around us, that are pressuring us to do things that seem like they're okay and normalized, as you mentioned in the first half of the conversation, but yet they are preventing us from experiencing something better? Is there a way to frame this so it isn't about restricting us from things that look like they're good, but instead about protecting us from things that aren't on the other end of them actually good for us?
Sure. So, you know, boundaries comes to mind. And I talk about boundaries in the classroom when I'm interacting with students. And when the word boundaries comes up, a lot of times we think negative, right? That's something I can't do. You're restricting me by keeping me out of something. Well, boundaries are actually for our protection. And so when we frame it like that with students, with our children, like, hey, my job as a parent is to protect you. My job is to keep you safe. And that comes down from God, right? He gives us boundaries. He gives us safeguards for our protection because he loves us. So part of that is learning to communicate well with our child. And we did that with our son. You know, the first conversation where we found out that he had been watching pornography, it was a mess. It was all over the place. But I feel like at the end of the conversation, I did something that was very good and was foundational for the rest of our relationship. And that was, I sat next to him on the bed and I put my arm around him and I said, look, we love you unconditionally. It's not based on your behavior. However, we are now going to change some things in our household. And I'm sorry that I didn't know this. I'm sorry that I have not protected you already. But when we change these things, when we put boundaries in place, it's not because we're punishing you. It's because it's our job as parents to protect you and to keep you safe. right? And so like God gives us those protections, we are now going to protect you. And when we frame boundaries like that, I think it's healthy. It's healthy. Every relationship should have some sort of boundary in it. Like, we're going to allow you to do so much, and then we're going to say no when it gets to the point where it's not acceptable or not healthy for me or for you. So whether it's with a coworker or a spouse or with a child, we need to have those boundaries in order to keep us safe and protected.
And how do these limits that you place on yourselves, on one another as spouses, or on your children help you have something better? Not just keep you from something that's good or fun, but it also gives you an opportunity for something better?
Right, exactly. So again, when we stay away from certain things and instead stay within the boundaries that God has created for us, that's where we thrive, right? That's where we are our best. So I am at my best when I don't watch pornography. Well, that's not real hard for me. That's not been a problem, right? So but I know that God created a space for me where I am, instead of filling my eyes with that, I'm filling it with things that are lovely and pure and helpful, right? So when we fill our minds and our eyes and our thoughts and our hearts with things of the Lord, then that's where we thrive. And that's where we stay safe. And oh gosh, isn't it great when God is the one filling us with his thoughts and his word and his prayers and all that? That's where we really flourish, right?
Yes. And how do we help our loved ones walk out of that behavioral addiction trap? There is a dopamine response issue with a behavioral addiction, kind of similar to a chemical addiction. It doesn't work exactly the same way, but you're replacing the brain's normal dopamine production with what you're seeking online. And that could be with the new text sexting kind of things that the kids are doing, in addition to the pornography addictions that happen. It could be gambling as well, for that matter, but that is how that works. It's a
Right.
dopamine response issue. So how do you help your loved one get through that and move forward in a way that's going to help them have deliverance and freedom from that addiction?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things, and I'll just, based on my own experience with our son, one of it was just one's education. Like, when we talk with them directly about what you said, like, here's what's happening in your brain and here's why it's not good for you. We also educated on the various ways that it can trickle down into the rest of their life. So talking about this is going to harm relationships in the future, whether it's with your girlfriend now, or whether it's your future spouse, or whether it's with an employer, or with your own kids. So educating on all the things. One of the things we like to educate in the classroom too is that pornography fuels human trafficking. So when we help the kids understand that this is harmful to other people in addition to yourself. So the educating, but then also, like, educating what's going to be good, how you're going to feel better when you find different avenues, different outlets for these things. So if you're bored and you're feeling like this is how I need to fulfill that problem, instead turning from that and finding a different outlet. So maybe exercising, or relaxation exercises, or eating well and making sure you're sleeping well. So getting back to the basics of what is healthy physically, spiritually, emotionally, and then walking through them with that. Now, when I talk with parents about their kids, one of the most important things is that the child really needs to want to walk away from it. So you have that moment, they're, yeah, a 5-year-old, you can physically pick them up and move them out of a space, but a 15-year-old, you can't do that as well. So trying to help them see and walking with them until they get to that point where they have the desire on their own to change. And then, praying with them, checking in with them every night, getting them some sort of a program where they understand the ramifications, but then also are working toward the healthy things. And so, yeah, and then walking it out with them and understanding that there's going to be setbacks. So, it was a long process with our son. It was several years before he could say to me, I'm not struggling anymore. And so having that understanding heart, we need to understand where our kids are coming from. And some of that's looking at what we do, right? Because I struggle with various things, temptations. It's not the same temptations, but if I think about the temptations that I struggle with and how they pull me in, then I can have some empathy for my son and where he's at and understand, what, if there's a setback, yeah, I've had a few setbacks myself, so I can come alongside better and be more understanding.
So what is one thing that you want to make sure that parents and spouses know about navigating these sexpectation traps and how to walk out of them?
Well, first of all, this doesn't define you, right? Let's give some hope here. So, this is a moment in time. It's not the rest of their lives, hopefully. And so it doesn't define us as a parent. It doesn't define us as a spouse, and it doesn't define our children. So their story's not over yet, and our story's not over yet. We are a work in progress. God is still doing a job on us. So there is hope, and we can walk out in that hope.
I love that. And I know that you have more specifics available through all of the things that you provide on your website and in your book. Can you share how people can access those?
Absolutely. So the best way to get a hold of all the stuff is through hopefulmom.net. And I have a great resource page there that links to a lot of different things. I've got information about the book on there. And I do write blog posts too, and have guests who write blog posts. So ton of information. You can also catch me on Facebook at Difficult Conversations for Parents and on Instagram at difficult.conversations.
I hope that all of you listening were inspired and encouraged to go out and look up more information to help yourself, your family, your loved ones through these sexpectation traps that we find ourselves in this world. And of course, I also hope that you will hit subscribe and come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be found on the Edify app.